If you're just starting a trucking company, choosing the right entity is going to be one of the most important decisions that you make. Even before you get into getting a DOT number and an MC number, setting up insurance, getting an entity is really up there in terms of one of those decisions that could cost you a lot of money or save you a lot of money right when you start. So many of my clients come to me and ask me, Fahad, I've heard of LLCs and S corporations and C corporations. Which entity is the right one for me to make sure that I save the most money? If you guys are new here, my name is Fahad. I'm an IRS licensed enrolled agent, a tax accountant, and also a QuickBooks certified ProAdvisor. I run a virtual tax and accounting firm that focuses on the trucking industry, owner-operators, company drivers, fleet owners, lease operators. We help all of you guys save money in taxes, keep more of your very, very hard-earned money in your pockets at the end of the year. Okay, so enough of my intro. Let's get into the video. So first, why does it even matter which company I form? Well, the company that you form initially is going to have a lot of impact on things like your taxes at the end of the year, the way you pay yourself. When you scale the business, when you add drivers, add trucks, it's going to determine the ease of you being able to scale, and also things like compliance, bookkeeping costs, and legal liability protections, which are super important. Now we'll get into it, but certain business types are really meant more for bigger companies and more established companies, while some business types are more flexible and kind of set up on purpose for small to mid-sized companies. And so you'll find a lot of small to mid-sized companies that really love these business types as opposed to the bigger ones. So question, do I really need to form an entity to get into the trucking business? Technically, no. You don't actually need to form an entity. The FMCSA does not require it. You can get a DOT number, an MC number. You can start doing business with your personal name. However, and big caveat, if you have been in or around this business for any amount of time whatsoever, you know that this business is a very high risk business. This is a business where you have a lot of liability. You have a $200,000, $100,000, $50,000 asset going down the road, 80,000 pounds. It can do damage to people, God forbid. And so there's always risk of accidents. There's always risk of these things, lawsuits. They happen all the time. That's why insurance companies ask an arm and a leg and your firstborn to get started in the business. But the reality is that this is a very, very, very high risk business. And so if you do not have a company that you're working under, your personal assets in the event of a lawsuit, an accident, insurance companies, lawyers going after you, I would say 99.9% chance your personal assets are going to be up for grabs. That's your home equity, your cars, valuables, jewelry, all this kind of stuff. That's your own stuff. And there's really nothing you can do about it. So I would say that's not what we want. You must register an entity if you're gonna go through and you're gonna start a trucking company, which comes with some expenses, right? It comes with some expenses. If you're going to start a trucking company, guys, do yourself a favor, spend a few $100, get a company set up at the very least. Do not do business in your own name. So before we get into the type of entity that you should register, and I promise I'm getting there, I want to clear something up that I think many people find confusing. So there is a difference between the entity that you're going to register at the state level and the way the IRS is going to treat that entity for purposes of your tax filing. Then you have to keep in mind that you are allowed to change the tax classification of that entity, the IRS's view of that entity. You can file what's called an election, which allows you to change the way the IRS will view your entity without changing anything about it on the state level. So here's a quick breakdown of the common types of entities that you can register with your state. So with your state, you can register a sole proprietorship if it's just you. You can register a general partnership if it's, let's say, you and somebody else or two or more partners. You can register a limited partnership. You can register a limited liability company, and you can also register a corporation. Now, right off the bat, I'm gonna scratch off 3 of these for simplicity's sake. You don't want to do business as a sole proprietorship. You don't want to do business as a general partnership. Why? Sole proprietorships, general partnerships, they don't have really any liability protection, like I mentioned before. They just really don't offer anything. You might as well be doing business in your own name or the name of the partners. There's really no advantage. Like I mentioned before, you want some liability protection. Those 2 entity types don't offer it at all. And then you also really don't want to be forming the third one, which is an LP, a limited partnership. If you're registering an LP, it's for a very specific reason. It's more complex, more paperwork, all this kind of stuff, you don't need it. So that was easy. Now we only have two options, LLC and corporation. So let's get into some of the differences between registering an LLC with your state versus registering a corporation with your state. So let's get into the differences between ownership structure. LLCs are member managed. Okay, so owners are called members in the LLC. Super easy to add and remove members. The company itself, the LLC, can either be member managed or manager managed. Usually it's just member managed. And then with corporations, if you've ever bought stock in Apple, Microsoft, any, take your pick of any publicly traded company, you know that when you buy stock, you are called a shareholder. So it's the same thing if you open a corporation, you are going to be a shareholder in that corporation. You have another partner, maybe they'll have 50% of the shares, you'll have 50%. So that's kind of how the ownership structure works. Now, liability protection. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of why we are registering the company in the first place. Why would we register the company if we don't want liability protection? That is what we're looking for. What is the difference between LLCs and Corps? The great thing is, mostly, for most intents and most purposes, they are pretty much the same. As long as they are maintained, you're gonna have liability protection. Now, a caveat, corporations for bigger companies generally, when you take on investors and when you kind of have, maybe you're raising capital or something like that, generally speaking, they're gonna want you to be a corporation as opposed to an LLC. Corporations, just in general, they have a little bit more, they're kind of a higher tier a little bit when it comes to protection and kind of that separation between your personal and business stuff. But LLCs, again, for most intents and purposes, are completely fine, completely adequate, and they work perfectly well. Now, here's one of the advantages with LLCs. The paperwork requirements. It's just simply less. You don't have as many formalities with an LLC and kind of upkeep and maintenance of the LLC as you do with the corporation. With corporations, you have things like meeting minutes, you have bylaws, you have board of directors, you have all these kind of corporate things that you just need to maintain legally to keep the liability protection really, really solid. With LLCs, you don't need them. It's much simpler, much easier. You have the liability protection and the formalities are much less, which means it's much less time, much less hassle. If you're out on the road, you really don't have time for any of this anyway. So, it's better really in terms of paperwork and ease of use to go LLC. So when comparing these two, which one is best? Well, for most trucking companies, I would say that you should probably register an LLC. Reason being, LLCs, again, they're just fewer headaches, fewer hassles, fewer formalities and paperwork that you have to keep up with, and you still get the same great liability protection. Now, real quick, I just want to add something on the tax classification side as well. Now, I do have another video that goes into all these different tax classifications and kind of which ones are best for trucking companies. But for now, I'll leave you with another reason why I think trucking companies are best suited as LLCs, and actually many companies, small to mid-sized companies, are best suited for LLCs in general. Remember when I said that you can actually elect for the IRS to treat your entity differently. So let's say I register a corporation or I register an LLC with my state, I can actually have the IRS treat that company differently depending on my personal needs in terms of taxes. There is a restriction on this. Now with LLCs, if I register that company just with myself as the sole member or owner, the IRS is going to treat that company as a sole proprietorship for tax purposes. If I register it with two or more members who are more owners, it's going to be treated as a general partnership. I can then also make elections for my LLC to have it treated as an S corporation or have it treated as a C corporation. However, if you register a corporation on the state level, the IRS will treat that corporation as a C corporation by default, and then you can make an election to have it treated as an S corporation. So you only have two tax classification options with corporations, whereas with LLCs, you actually have four. So that is really the benefit, even if it's much better for your tax situation to have that corporation treated as a sole proprietorship or treated as a partnership if there's more than one shareholder. It doesn't matter. The IRS won't let you actually treat that as a sole proprietorship, as a partnership. They're not going to let you do it, even if it means you'll save money on taxes. This is why I really recommend people go with LLCs. They're easy to set up. They're easy to do business with. You get all the liability protection and you get a ton of flexibility when it comes to tax time and when it comes to filing your taxes and tax planning. You have a whole bunch of options. You have a whole bunch of flexibility. I hope this video was helpful, guys, in answering the question of which company you should choose. Again, I recommend LLCs. Truckers, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and also drop a comment below if you have any questions, concerns, anything like that. I can always turn it into another video. Guys, thank you so much again for watching. Truckers, Stay safe out there on the roads. Keep America moving. God bless.